Thank you for choosing to listen to Sophia's birth story. My birth story is my birthright, my rite of passage into this world. And like all birth stories, this is personal, sensitive, and powerful when spoken out loud. What I'm transmitting through this podcast is not so much about knowledge or know-how as a therapist, but a very personal process of embodiment from conception to birth. Before sharing our birth stories out loud, either about giving birth or being born, I always advise people to take a moment to ground yourself, to feel into whether it is the right moment either to speak or to listen to content such as this. Are you feeling particularly vulnerable right now? Are you pregnant or about to give birth perhaps? Did you experience your own birth traumatically? If so, you might want to give yourself a moment to check in, to see if you have the space for this right now. If you're driving, feeding, or multitasking while listening to this, please be aware that it's a deep dive and that it can be emotional. If you feel overwhelmed by listening to any of the content, please allow yourself to stop, pause, or come back to it later. And if any questions do show up for you, please feel free to reach out and get in touch. Thank you for listening in.
It's my first long-anticipated pre-birth journey training module with David Sawyer in Bad Orb, Germany. The experience is as powerful as I imagined it to be, if not more. Of course, I couldn't have anticipated the magical, serendipitous moments which arise in a session, adding breadth and scope to one's healing process. I guess it was inevitable my vanished twin would come up as a primary layer of exploration for my first pre-birth journey. I saw my twin and another in attendance in this group and chose him to be my partner in crime, so to speak. As is common in this resonant and responsive liquid field, the person who shows up in one's presence is usually exactly who and what needs to happen next in the process of unfolding. When we work in water, our experience of the journey becomes shared by the giver and the receiver, and very often there is a pattern that is common and resonant to both. What becomes crystal clear when working with birth memory and water is how important it is for us to have processed our own birth story in order to contain it for another without our own agency interfering. My undying and unsatisfied need for connection, left in the absence of my twin, had yet to find its equal. No lover, no brother, no mentor, no friendship had ever really been able to meet and to satisfy the deeply embedded contraction in my system, interpreted as a loss in me, invisibly remembered by a body that keeps the score. And yet in the moment, my dear friend and colleague V is gently cradling me in his arms and physically places my surrendered hand so I can feel his heart's pulse while he sensitively listens out for mine. My whole internal universe blows wide open with remembrance. In this very moment, when our body tissue is all crumbled and wrinkly after an hour of water's warm intimacy, when the breath has been engaged at its deepest while fully immersed below the water surface, when all that can be heard is the vibrating pulsation of our heartbeats, when all else has been stripped to its essence, the last memory I have alive of my twin becomes unsuspectingly reenacted. The single moment which transpired between myself and my precious colleague and friend brought me back to that desperately sought-out sense of togetherness and belonging. It brought me back to the moment my twin and I were still together, before my twin left and marked me forever. No, I don't believe it was just my readiness to go there. I believe it was the collective field of those people present who carry the capacity to hold the memories arising with containment and compassion, as well as the profound natural intelligence contained within the element of water. Water loves, water remembers, and water heals. What this single moment offered me was the depth of connection I was seeking to finally feel met. It wasn't my mother's love I was seeking. It was my twin's pulse and sudden absence of it that formed my first impression of relating before I was even born. I wasn't seeking a conditional, earthly kind of love, nor any kind of adult intimacy. I'd been seeking this silent, all-knowing, all-encompassing understanding of another, communicated through our unique individual heart pulses, reverberated by water. Up until the age of around 12, I thought I could literally communicate telepathically. I thought I didn't need to communicate verbally in order to be understood. You can imagine how that ended up. Apart from the deep healing, nourishment, and inner transformation this moment offered me, it also encapsulated years of experiential learning I could share with babies and their families I came to work with in water. I taught them how to listen more deeply to one another and how to co-regulate through their heartbeats. Because of it, I presented a paper in a heart hospital in Oslo called Staying in the Heart during the Nordic Baby Swimming Conference in 2019. I shared with other aquatic educators the importance of the heart's pulse in water and how to work with it intentionally so that babies in utero or those already born can really feel seen and met from the inside out. Learning during integrative aquatic therapy trainings are entirely immersive and experientially contained by an understanding of how we develop in the womb. For me, the ripple effect of this learning reached far and wide, not only in resourcing my own need for connection and understanding, but also quenching my agency for unproductive, repetitive cycles. Through the unfolding which took place in the water, I could track the unfolding which took place in my work and everyday life. What became more and more evident is how my internal restructuring or remembering, if you like, created a vitality and fluid potency externally.
Thank you for listening to my podcast. Knowing that you did makes me feel proud and a little vulnerable at the same time. I'm happy to receive your questions or feedback. If you would like to support my work, you can do so through a one-off donation or by subscribing to the podcast. All the details of how to do so are in this episode description. I am of course available to support you individually, online, or to welcome you in person on retreat on the beautiful island of Corfu, Greece. If you own a business, or if you're part of an organization, I might be able to present an inspirational talk for your audience, or even develop a training program for your staff. Thank you for considering all options, and thank you for listening in.